Welcome back to Is This a Great Game or What? And our guest is former Major League catcher John Baker, who was a really good player, and he's a better writer than I am. He's got a vocabulary that absolutely dwarfs mine. John, this is my friend. This is my son, Jeff. He's got my voice, he's got my height, but he's way more talented than I am.
That seems to be some common humility out of you, Tim. I appreciate it. Jeff, nice to meet you.
Well, let's start with the hat, John. You got an Expos hat on. What's that? What's that all about?
Oh yeah. Well, I never got to play against the Expos, and so this year I celebrated in December. My wife and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary, and Montreal was a city that we never got to go to. It was out of the National League by the time I got to the big leagues. And so we went, and it was absolutely incredible. And as we were walking through, I said, I've always loved this Expos clown hat. And if I'm going to purchase one, I'm going to purchase one at the root of where the Montreal Expos are from. So I bought it in Montreal, and it's one of my favorite hats to wear. Also, not being affiliated with a baseball team anymore, it's a great way to celebrate the beauty of baseball without having to have some sort of a rooted interest anywhere.
Well, John, to that end, this was your first spring training in 25 years where you were not there. First off, what did you do this spring, and what was it like not wearing a uniform in spring training for the first time in a quarter century?
It was good question. It was definitely a strange feeling, but one that I felt, I think, validated in this year, being able to spend time. My kids are getting older. My oldest daughter's in high school now. My younger daughter is in middle school. And my life has been on the road, I think, since I was about 18. You go to college, play baseball, and then hit the road. I played in Cape Cod for 2 seasons while I was playing at Cal. And, I basically left at 18 and never came back. And it's been a constant series of airplane flights to airplane flights and hotels to hotels for the last 25 years. So it felt really nice just to do stuff like chop potatoes, watch television shows that I'd never seen. I never had the opportunity to see. My kids are old enough now that we can kind of like share some of the same interests. So one of the highlights this year of spring training was being able to watch all of the Stranger Things with my daughters. That was a massive highlight. So,
Dad, I'll take it from here.
Yes,
Dad,
I'm going to need some help on this. Jeff is the pop culture reference guy too, and the music man and everything else. So explain.
I was just going to ask you, what shows are you watching? Because we find a lot of the time with our guests that when they finally have a moment, a season, an off season to slow down, they try to catch up on shows. Stranger Things. So did you start at the very beginning? Dad, for perspective, Netflix has had this show for I think it's like 10 years at this point. I think it started in 2015.
So my wife and I watched the original show, and then we were in the little kid phase where like some monster running through the room is going to be impossible to have on because now you've got nightmares to deal with. But then the kids got old enough to be able to watch it, and so my daughter loves film and acting. She was telling me the story behind and Tim and I talked about this stuff in the past, but I'm a big fan of I want to know the story behind what's going on. I want to know more of the context. I want to know about the people that are doing it, not just the thing that happens. And so she was telling me about the Duffer Brothers and how they had this passion to make movies, and they loved 80s movies. And anybody who's in their mid 40s that grew up in the United States is like me and played sports, has seen all of those Jean-Claude Van Damme, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone. I've seen every single movie from Cobra to the Terminator. And then to find out that they wanted to build this homage to all these great movies. And I wasn't looking at it through that lens when I was watching it, but being able to watch it again. So we'd watched the first season. We started at season 2, and I think we watched 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the span of like a week as a family. We had some downtime, and we just buckled up and watched 4 or 5 episodes in a row. And I was blown away to be able to watch it like that. An incredible story. And then again, the history behind it, watching a cast of characters grow up. It kind of reminded me of some of the stuff I've seen in baseball, especially in this last job where you get into, for example, working with the Pirates in 2021, having like Jared Jones and drafting Bubba Chandler and Endy Rodriguez, and seeing these kids start like in the complex and then see them 5-6 years later in the major leagues. there is some parallel there to watching that cast of kids essentially grow up over the course of 10 years. And again, like those are the stories that I love. And it was just incredibly well done. And I recommend it to everybody.
Right. John, like Cody Bellinger said not long ago, he'd never seen a Seinfeld episode ever, which I found impossible to believe. Have you watched a TV show beyond Stranger Things, like a sitcom that everyone else has seen and you said, hey, I finally got to see this? Or have you done anything?
Yeah, well, that was one of them. And then we also watched The Queen's Gambit. But as
so
far
good.
as like, yeah, The Queen's Gambit. And then, I've always been an avid reader. And I finally got the time to sit with some of the stuff that I hadn't been able to like fully process while all the work stuff was going on. I'm going to pull out my first nerd card of this interview and say that I got to spend a lot of time with some Dostoevsky, which I'd never gone through before. And, there's a joke that we have in our family because I was reading one of Dostoevsky's books and I'm reading it and I'm going, man, like this like earnest approach that this character has to every situation. It reminds me so much of myself. I'm like, this is the most I've ever self-identified with a character in a book. And my oldest daughter said, well, what's the title of the book? And I'm like, oh, it's called The Idiot, which I don't know if it's good or bad. You know, you're reading these like 19th century Russian novel and going like, man, I really can relate to what this guy is going through, like earnestly wanting to show up and win and do the right thing. But then it always continues to go wrong over and over again. And I'm like, this sounds a lot like a baseball career in a way. You know, you work so hard to get it right and you just never actually figure it out. And over time, you have to accept that it is that process. You know, people love to say, trust the process. It's a very common quote in sports, trust the process. And I was always, as a player, I'm going like, what the hell is the process? Like, what is it? What is this thing that I'm supposed to trust? And then it's only until you get on the other side that you look back and you go, oh, part of the process is the realization and the acceptance that you never get to figure this out and that's okay. And that's okay. And it's okay to just strive without having to see the thing at the end. And yes, it helps to be validated to do something like play in the major leagues. But sports are always going to be more than that. They're always going to be a deeper story, and there's always going to be something that you can learn about yourself. So yes, a lot of heavy reading. And then I think the last thing, I've been focused on building, taking what I've learned over the last 25 years and finding a way to say, okay, like what are the things that work, not only that I learned from experientially, but then also academically after I stopped playing, because I went back and finished my undergrad and went to graduate school and got a degree in performance psychology. And was working in the mental skills space, which was for me, my favorite work by far to do post playing. I had fun as a farm director. I had fun overseeing our performance department with the Pirates in a VP role. But my favorite, like the most fulfilling work was the one-on-one work I got to do with the players when I was working with the Cubs in the mental skills department. And I thought, okay, now I have some time to be able to figure some of this stuff out. Like what really is the message that I want to get out to people? And how can I impact people and help them kind of shortcut some of these things that I see players go through over and over again? How do they figure out who they are? How do they train their attention system? How do they develop the right rituals, meaning kind of routines that are actually infused with meaning, so that they can perform really well? And how do they get the most out of their sports experience? And this isn't just at the professional level for me, because I think that these principles are really ingrained, and they're most effectively ingrained when we're like 12, 13, 14 years old. And we can get into this if you guys want, but what I've noticed, and I'm going to, like we said earlier, I'm going to go see these flag football games later. But what I've noticed as I started working with some of the younger people is that, man, like the same complaints that I would have about professional baseball, the overreaches of empiricism, the idea that we know everything and we can break everything down to the smallest little bit and then put it back together and it's just the same thing without the context of who the human being is, that is like really seeped into youth sports, ranking systems and money and stuff. And I'm like, that is not what youth sports, or that's not what sports in general is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about the people working together and training really hard and building camaraderie and trying to accomplish the really difficult thing. There's this element of selflessness to it, that when you commoditize every person and you make every individual thing that they do into some sort of asset profile of them, I think you really lose the essence of what we're trying to or what sports is supposed to teach us. And
Yeah,
so I've been working through that.
Having fun. We talk about youth sports so much on our podcast, and I feel like a lot of the times the fun gets lost in it. And these kids, by the time they turn 18, 19, they've pitched 10,000 innings. They've never played in the outfield. They're exhausted. They don't play any other sports, and they're getting Tommy John, and it's ridiculous, right? We need to find those times. We've interviewed so many amazing guests, and we work with a group called Game Changer who does all of the, the live streaming of games. And we need to kind of now back away from the world of numbers for our youth, for our kids, let them play multiple sports and find the fun in the game again. So I think it's awesome what you're saying, because it's right. And you're going to flag football today for your nieces and women's flag football. That's awesome. How old are they?
They are, let's see, they're like 8 and 11.
Wow.
And you brought up the word fun. And if you look at the research, and this is the thing, I think a lot of people, this information doesn't seem to be like prevalently out there for people. But when you look at the research, and this is like Sports Psychology 101, original textbook that you get when you sign up to go do a graduate program like that. You start reading through it and you go, oh, what's the number one factor in the sampling age? So Jean Cote's sampling ages up until 12 or 13 is called sampling. They have taken the different age groups and, from sampling to specialization to professionalization over time. But the sampling age, there's only one metric that matters. It has nothing to do with how many games the kids won, or how hard they were hitting the ball, or what their velocities were when they were pitching up until 12 or 13. The only metric that matters, if you want your kid to play in the major leagues, or you want your kid to be an Olympic athlete or some high performer in a sports field, the only metric that matters is fun. That's the only thing. It has nothing else matters. 70% of kids in the United States quit sports before their 13th birthday. And the number one reason, it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun.
Wow.
And I think about it in terms of like, what are our roles as parents, or if we're going to coach youth sports teams, what are our metrics? What are our objectives that we should be trying to achieve? And we completely missed when we start saying, well, he's the 52nd best shortstop in Northern California, and he went to this showcase and he hit the ball 102, so therefore now he's the 43rd best shortstop. We missed the point. We could completely strike three. Like, this is ABS right down the middle. We called it a ball. I'm going to challenge it right now. I'm going to challenge it. It's a strike. Fun is the most important metric, and we can't let that go, because when you have fun, if you think about why, in my opinion, when you think about why, if I'm having fun, and I remember my time here, because I'm back in the Bay Area, but I remember my time here playing for the Walnut Creek Little League Angels and the guys that I had on my team. I'm still in touch with some of them. And when you think about those times, when it's fun, the losses might hurt a little bit more, because you care about the people around you, and that drives you to want to go get back after it again. And that over time starts building resilience, because practice is fun. The game is fun. And hey, you win, you lose, you go get pizza afterwards, or you have orange slices and Capri Suns, and you're smiling and you're laughing and you're joking, because you're kind of learning subconsciously that, man, we showed up every day this week to practice. We did everything we could, and it just didn't work out, and that's okay. But guess what? We get to go play tomorrow. And that's how you develop volitional, intrinsic motivation in people, and not this extrinsic idea of, hey, get 3 hits and I'll give you $20. That's the easy route for us to take, I think, as parents. In a lot of ways, that's the easy route for coaches to take. And then, I'll spare us all the conversation of how it's youth baseball is a whatever, 14 or $15 billion industry, and we've just figured out ways to capitalize and monetize it. But in doing so, yeah, the early specialization that you were talking about, it just leads to injuries and burnout and dropout and a bad time. And I hate to see it, because when done right, it's one of the most formative developmental experiences that we can have as people, is being on a sports team as a kid.
John, we'll get back to that and to mental skills in a minute. But Dostoevsky, you are a catcher. You wore the tools of ignorance for years. How do you explain that you love to read that guy? Where did that come from? Were you a tremendous reader when you were 5? Were your parents always telling you the answer is in books and the answer is in knowledge and information? Where did it come from?
So my dad has a psychology degree from Stanford, and he likes to joke when he talks to people about me that I wasn't raised, I was trained, which it's kind of dark. But no, I was a school first kid. I don't know that a lot of people know this story about me, but I was I was I believed that I wasn't going to play baseball after high school. And so I went to a great sports school here in Northern California called De La Salle. That's tons of notoriety for its football program, and it's just an incredible environment to be raised in as a high school athlete. I still say to this day, I never saw in the last 25 years of professional sports and 3 at the Division I level. So in the last 28 years of really high level sports, I never saw a group of people work harder than I did in high school. And we did it for each other, not for anybody else. So I'm blessed and biased from that experience. But I was the salutatorian in my high school class, gave a speech at graduation on the day that we lost the section championship at the Oakland Coliseum, had a uniform on underneath my cap and gown, and we drove from graduation to our baseball game. And I thought that was my last baseball game. I wanted to go to UCLA and study political science and become an attorney. And my second love was literature. As a kid, I just loved to read. I was fascinated by stories. I've always been fascinated by stories. And kind of read through every different possible genre. And there were some things that in the past that I had picked up and gone through and been like, I don't have the time to understand all the content. Like, I don't know what the political climate in 19th century Russia really was like. So how am I supposed to get all these jokes? And so finally, with a little bit of time, the first thing I did is I said, what's the stuff that I've had the most difficulty getting through? I finally have the time and space to mentally try to get through it now. And I'm happy that I went. I'm happy that I went there. But yeah, that's the reason. The reason is because I think I was constrained to focus on other things. And again, it's like, I would say I didn't specialize in baseball until I got to Cal. That's when it really became the thing that I was most focused on. And fortunately, in that realm, I just loved to practice. That was my kind of mindfulness practice, I would go to high school baseball practice, and then I would drive to this local batting cage where they would let me hit in the cage by myself. And I would just go hit there for like an hour afterwards. And I think it was more of a therapeutic experience than I was necessarily learning anything, but it kind of built over time the work habits to say that, baseball, and people may take this the wrong way, but I think that there are certain physical thresholds that you've got to cross to be an NBA player. You can't work hard and be 7'1". And when you look at the NFL, those guys, they work incredibly hard as well, but there's also a higher kind of physical standard to reach there. I always look at baseball as something that, you see all the different bodies that are out on a field and you go, man, there's a million different ways to get here. But the biggest consistency across all of those guys, from the tallest players in the game to the smallest players in the game, is a really consistent work ethic and ability to focus when it matters most. And if you can kind of do those two things, it's not a guarantee that you play Major League Baseball, but I feel like in baseball you still have a chance, and that's different than the other two.
Right. And John, this is a loaded question, but I had lunch with, among others, the other day, Nolan Ryan. I probably shouldn't repeat the story, but he said when he was with the Astros as a club president in his mid-60s, a young person joined the organization and armed with all sorts of statistics and data and everything else, and looked at Nolan Ryan and said, in 2 weeks, I'll know everything that you know about pitching. 2 weeks. And it worries me to no end that there is a person out there that got a job in baseball thinking in 2 weeks I will know what the greatest power pitcher of all time knows, all of that, the hardest pitcher to hit of all time, and in 2 weeks I'll know what you know. Again, loaded.
John, I'm going to interrupt you because I wish everybody is watching on YouTube, because the steam coming out of John Baker's headphones and the size and the eye closes. I mean, I cannot wait to hear your response.
I mean, we love to think that we can we're just so arrogant as human beings. We love to think that we can measure and explain everything. And I think I would start with saying that for me, the qualification of something to be called great art, okay, like we could take poetry, for example. Poetry is great because it conveys a message that is more than the words that you're reading on the page. Something else is happening in that kind of ineffable, unable to describe realm. Okay, so yes, we can watch something and we can record every physical measurement that we can record about it, but we never know what is going on inside of that person's mind. It's like take biomechanics, for example. Biomechanics just chops the head off of a person. It says these are all the angles that the bones are moving, but it has nothing to do with intent. And I'm going to get back to Nolan Ryan, but I'll start by saying this. When I was working for the Pirates, we hired a biomechanist, and I was incredibly impressed by her because of what she said. She said in biomechanics, we're missing something. I said, interesting. Usually people, when they're being interviewed, they say, we'll be able to figure this out and I'll tell you exactly why, and we're going to make the organization better. And she said, no, there's a lack of humility here in that we cut the head off. We don't know what the people's intent was. And she talked about a project that she worked on when she was getting her PhD, where she had graduate students walk and she did a gait analysis of them. And so as they're walking, how their body's moving as they're walking, and that she created that as a baseline. Then she gave them a really complex problem to solve in their head and watched them walk, and they moved completely differently. And so her point, which I think speaks to this, is that we don't know everything we think we know. We don't understand the level of conviction that Nolan Ryan had on the mound, the belief that the fastball was going to go where he wanted it to go, or that it didn't have to go where he wanted it to go, and he was still going to be successful. Was talking to a pitcher last week about conviction, and I said, they've done a lot of modeling now, and they basically have said that the most effective pitch selection would be like total game theory randomization. Just throw whatever at any time, and that'd be the most effective strategy to use in baseball. And I said, I actually think they're right, but only if the guy on the mound believes that that's the pitch that he should be throwing in that moment, that there's full conviction. When I was catching, I would tell my pitchers all the time, I'd say, I want you to shake, but it's inside very specific parameters. If, as the ball is coming back to you on the mound, you have something that is formed as the pitch that you want to throw in your mind, I demand that you shake to that pitch. And I don't care if it is the wrong pitch based on what the simulation gave us ahead of time of what we need to throw to this guy. Because when we watch a Major League Baseball game, generally what we see is that the balls that get hit over the fence are the ones that end up right down the middle, which means that they're not executed, which means that there is some sort of lack of conviction or a lack of consistency on the pitcher's ability to throw the ball where he wants. Convicted pitches are the most effective. And so we could say that we know everything physically, potentially, about Nolan Ryan. We know exactly, he probably had I don't think anybody's ever gone back and done this, but he probably had like a lower release height, high spin, high velocity fastball that he could throw 94, 95 miles an hour and throw right by people, because there is some sort of optical illusion created with how he pitches. And then he's got the big leg kick that moves up in front of him, which is distracting. And then he's got the persona of that person on the mound who's been pitching for 3 or 4 decades or something crazy. There's so much that goes into what he's doing on the mound that you could take a 22-year-old and have him replicate that exactly, and he would not have nearly the same amount of success because of all of the other stuff that's going on. And those are the things that we can't measure. There's so much that happens that we have to look at and go, man, this is a human game. If we could just predict all of it, what would be the point? Why wouldn't we just simulate it and gamble on it on the computer? No, we have to play the game because of the things that we see. And then the stuff that we're attracted to, I think, is when the stuff breaks out of that mold. When things change, when people do things that are exceptional, they're only exceptional because we don't see them all the time. And that's why we continue to tune in over and over again to baseball. I want to see the time when the guy does the thing that nobody thought was going to happen. That's the beauty of live sports that we miss when we start saying, well, we can pre-script this thing from pitch one all the way to the end. And the guy sitting with the iPad in the dugout, he knows better of what this pitcher needs to throw right now. I think that's kind of It's ridiculous, and it's ridiculous kind of in this hubris way of like, we don't know everything. As I age, that's one of the things that stuck out to me the most. The older I get, the more I realize, the less I know. And it's wonderful because it means there's a lot of stuff out there to learn. But being able to walk in and say, oh, I'll be able to tell you everything about, I'll know everything about pitching in 2 weeks after I read a book is not the same. It's not the same thing. That's like saying the three of us could tell you how to climb up Mount Everest because we read a book.
Right.
Yeah, good luck. We're going to have to go do that for ourselves before we can say that we know what we're talking about.
Tell Jeffrey the story about when you were with the Pirates. I don't want to hurt anybody here, but somebody's talked to you about your career as a hitter. What did he say to you?
Yeah. So we were in a box, and we were talking about what was going on, and it was almost like I started like making fun of my career as you weren't a great hitter, so like, maybe you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to that, basically. And I looked at him and I thought, man, this is, if this was high school, I might try to put this guy in a garbage can. But we're adults now, and it's somebody I actually like and respect too. But I think that it's less about the comment, and it's more about the ability for the way things are constructed now for people to feel like they have the ability to say something like that to someone, because, man, we look at what did 7 people hit 300 last year. We look at how hard, how good pitching has gotten because of all this technology that we have. And shoot, I got to oversee, I would argue, the best pitching development space in professional baseball in Pittsburgh. And I see the things that we're doing with these guys, and I see how quickly they're changing and adapting, and how this real-time feedback comes out, and they are literally better from bullpen session to bullpen session. I got to watch Paul Skenes go, hey, I need to have something that goes this way. And like 3 months later, he comes back with an unhittable split finger fastball. And it's almost like the people that haven't had that experience, they have no real understanding of the difficulty. And so they feel like because they've watched it for so long, or they have this authority to be able to say like, oh, well, you weren't very good at this. And I'm like, we couldn't even fill up a stadium yet with the amount of people that were lucky enough to hit the like opportunity lottery, where it's like you're playing well enough and somebody gets hurt and you break through somehow to be able to get there. I spent 6.5 years in the minor leagues before I got to the big leagues. I made 2 AAA All-Star teams. Well, I got called up before I got to play in the second one, but I made 2 AAA All-Star teams before I got there. That's a long history of success to be able to break into the highest thing in the world. And so like for me, I look at it, I have respect. I treated our minor league players, the kids that we signed in the Dominican Republic, I treated them with the same amount of respect that I would have treated Willie Mays, because just getting there is so hard. Making it through that way is so hard. Getting into funneling into professional baseball is so challenging. There's not one player that makes it into the professional space that is a bad hitter. It's
right.
Just impossible by numbers to say this guy is bad. Even somebody who plays 1 season of minor league baseball. Baseball is very, very, very challenging, and hitting is the hardest part of it. And to say that anybody in the professional space is bad, again, it's almost like flipping your cards over at the poker table and saying like, actually, I just had 2-7 offsuit.
My favorite stat to throw at people, former players, whoever it might be, is the smallest stadium in Major League Baseball's Progressive Field in Cleveland. Love that ballpark. It holds about 34,000. According to Baseball Reference, 23,500 people have ever played Major League Baseball. So if you put them in the stands, it would be a relatively slow day at the ballpark. So when you put that into perspective, when you go to a baseball game the next time, keep in mind, that's the smallest ballpark I could possibly give you an example of. We're not even coming close to filling that ballpark, and that's every player who's played since the late 1800s. So making a ball club, a Major League ball club is an incredible feat, and we need to remind our kids of that if they aren't making it. It's ridiculous that somebody would say that to a Major League.
And let's tie this back into youth sports too. Think about the amount of people that aren't going to be able to make it just based on those numbers. Baseball is for them too, if we set up the conditions for it to go right. Like that's the thing that always kind of galls me. Like there is some sort of through line between the we know everything modern front office and the people coaching 13-year-old teams, taking them all over the country so that they can play 150 games. There's some sort of coherence there that I have not yet been able to like fully square in my mind. There's a couple of puzzle pieces still missing.
John, I talked to a buddy of mine years ago. He coached a 12-year-old travel team, and these kids were good. And he got tired of the parents yelling at the children every time they made an out. And this guy pitched in college. He beat Roger Clemens in a college World Series game. And at age 55, John, he could still let it go. So one day, he's so sick and tired of the parents that he tells all the dads in front of the moms and the kids, "You're taking batting practice against me." And he went out there, and as you can imagine, he struck them all out. He humiliated every one of them. And two of them came to him and said, "What the hell was that all about?" And he said, "You have no idea how hard this game is to play. Now you know what it feels like to be humiliated in front of everyone. Stop yelling at your kids." That's what
Yes.
we need once in a while, do we not?
Yeah, we absolutely need that. And it's funny you bring this up, because one of the things, as I've started to work with some younger athletes, I've realized that I'm talking to these kids, and I'm going, oh, I think I actually need to talk to your parents. I think that's and so I developed a guide that I send out to them, but I'll just read from some of it here. The uncomfortable truth is that kids can feel your stress and anxiety. If you're tense and worried in the stands, they pick up on it. If you're disappointed after a loss, they know. Your emotional state affects their ability to perform. And I tell people, there's only one thing that you have to say as a parent, especially if you're coaching. If you're not the coach on the team, and you're just like youth sports parent that is making the sacrifice financially and physically to drive them back and forth for practice. When they get in the car after the game, just say, "I love watching you play." That's it. You don't need to go any further. You don't need to analyze their swing. You don't know better than them. You don't need to watch teacher man videos on YouTube and try to teach your kid how to snap the barrel or something. Like, there's other people out there that can do that. The parent's role most specifically is a safe space for them to be able to process experiences, somebody that teaches them and guides them to develop self-awareness, someone who asks them good open-ended questions and gives them the space to talk, someone who loves them regardless of how they play, a model for managing emotions and staying present. That's what the parent responsibility is. But I think that, and I also think there's something too about how most of us play baseball when we're 5 years old. Like, we start, we play t-ball or something, and then we move up. And so every time we do grab a bat, or we see our kid, by proxy, grab that bat, it's almost like I see it in the stands, they revert back to, it's like they turn into 5-year-olds now. They turn into 5-year-olds that are unable to manage their emotions because, there's this love of wanting my kid to do well, but also this pride that I want my kid to be the best. When I was still playing and living in the Bay Area, my nephew was in high school. And so kind of crossed over at this one time where I could like go see him play a couple times at the high school field, and I could walk from my house to the field. So I walk over there, and I'm sitting in the stands, and I lasted an inning in the stands. For those reasons, I just heard this. I'm just hearing like it was the get your elbow up crowd yelling at the kids, and I stood up, walked around. There was a football field on the other side. I dragged a small bleacher section over, and then I climbed up on the bleachers out, and I just sat out in right center field and watched the game in peace. So I didn't have to listen to these people scream not only bad advice from like a mechanical perspective at the kid, but just like this, it was like sitting in a cloud of negativity and frustration and anger that I'm like, man, the kids, they may not be able to physically see it, but they look up in the stands and they see the guy, oh man, go like that after the kid punches out or throw something or walk off. Like, we're adults. We're not allowed to kick the garbage can. You have no helmet to throw in the stands. So just understand that your responsibility is to be this kind of like level presence that cares for your child regardless of how they perform on or off the field, and to constantly push them towards like, what can we do for you to have fun here? It's not just about winning and losing. It's about the enjoyment of this experience. Let's help build those conditions, work with coaching, make the experience enjoyable for kids. And you know what we'll get out of that in the long run? 15 years from now, we'll get a higher level of play at the major leagues if this is adopted, I think, in a wider way.
I was a Little League umpire for years. It was my first ever job when I was 15 years old. And I really did it for the money to go out for ice cream with my friends and everything. And I knew enough about baseball, and it sounded better than, mopping floors. But it really, what I didn't realize it was going to teach me was so many dealing with adult life skills. I mean, here I am 15. You think I look young now at 32, John. Imagine what I looked like at 15. I look like I should have been on the field with the 10-year-olds. Half the catchers were taller than me. But the point was, I had this one park that had an unusually close backstop to home plate. I mean, honestly, not up to code. It was very dangerous. A pass ball was like basically at the catcher's foot anyway. But the point was, I made a rule at that park that no parents could stand behind home plate because you were what felt like 2 feet away from your kid at the plate. And I told both coaches, hey, these are the ground rules for the game today. We can only have our scorekeeping moms or dads behind home plate for this game because there's plenty of stands everywhere else, but I had too many parents, elbow down, this head up, stay in the box, all this stuff. And how are we supposed to focus on learning how to hit the ball and have some fun if dad or mom is yelling at us behind them? I hated that ballpark. And I think you bring up such a great point of let the kids play and let's practice later.
John, you've already talked about this, but the mental skills part you said is your favorite job you've had, certainly in retirement. Explain what has made you love it as much as you have.
So I think that what a lot of people seem to need, and this obviously started from my work with the Cubs, but And I think that there's kind of two parts to this. At that part, there's what's called the paradox of elite performance, which is Gloria Balague. And the paradox of elite performance says that if you're an elite performer and you do really well, you're just meeting expectations. If you have a poor season, then or a poor week or a poor game or a poor month, then it's like the world is on fire. And so what I noticed at that level was a lot of guys not really being able to enjoy the experience of playing Major League Baseball. And again, Chicago is a big market, and that group of players, and very specifically like the Anthony Rizzo, David Ross, Ben Zobrist, Chris Bryant, John Lester, John Lackey, Jason Hayward, that kind of core group of players that was there are some of the best people I've ever been around in baseball. They and under Joe, what really changed in Chicago, what I got to see was they basically turned it back into we're on a little league team together again. And so I kind of got to, and that's why I think as the you go from 2014 when I played there to kind of the turnaround there in 2015 to then winning the World Series in 2016. And I'm very excited that David and Tony are doing their kind of podcast where they're going to bring some of those people back and tell those stories, because it is the epitome of what like a really close knit team looks like when a group of players inside of all that pressure is still doing things for each other and doing things for a bigger cause. Obviously you're trying to break a 108-year-old curse. But after that is actually, to me, the most interesting part, because now there's this level of expectation that group needs to meet. And the effort and the practice and the training, it was like they had done enough to win this World Series. Now there was this pressure to like do more. And like seeing the impact that it had on people that really cared, that's what pushed me back into graduate school, was being around those guys, working in the mental skills department with no academic foundation, and essentially just being like a listener to the frustrations that they were dealing with. It was like, I made the all-star team, but like, this isn't good enough. Like, this isn't good enough. I'm not good enough. We're not good enough. I saw some of that kind of going on post World Series, which I'll say as a huge credit to Dave Roberts. I got a chance to play. He was a coach on my team for a couple of years when I was with the Padres, and so I know the kind of person and man that Doc is, and what Freddie Freeman is like as well, and that group of players that they've assembled in LA. People, I think sometimes, again, this is like the kind of like the Nolan Ryan thing. We look at this from the outside and we say, well, yeah, sure, the Dodgers should win every year. They have the best team, but actually doing it is incredibly challenging given the internal and external pressures that are on that group of players. And so to be able to manage a locker room like that, and it's a testament to the people that they've signed down there in LA, that they're in this great position where, hey, if I don't do it, I can trust the next guy. And you now have this kind of like little league super team running out on the field every single year. That's a hard thing to manage, and they've done a good job. So they've got me really interested into like, how do we cope with the experience of like doing this really hard thing under pressure? What are the physiological things behind it? When you're playing a professional sport in front of 40,000 people, there is that moment where you transition in the autonomic nervous system from parasympathetic, so rest and relax, into fight or flight. Fight or flight is actually a good thing in the context of performance, because my vision kind of narrows, my heart beats faster, there's more blood, more oxygen. I kind of turn into Superman in a way. I can do physical things that I couldn't do in that other state. And so I was just fascinated by all of that stuff, and it kind of pushed me into it. And then it became, working with people just one-on-one, and like hearing their stories about where they came from, how they got there, what this means to them, what their values are, what they're trying to accomplish, why they want to try to accomplish those things, what the team means to them. I mean, it's like that never ever felt like any sort of work to me. It felt like just an incredible learning experience. And then I could take these things that I was, most of the time in my job with the Cubs, I'm in school and I was saying stuff like, I remember telling John Lackey one day, he walked Lackey walked out to the field, the wind was blowing in, and he comes in and he goes, fastballs down the middle all day today. That was his game plan. He saw that. It is as far as you boys want. And I was laughing, and I said, man, I read all this stuff in these sports psychology books, and I'm like doing these assignments, and I go, you and John Lester, like, God, you epitomize, like, I never saw it this way before, but you epitomize like all the things that they say these elite performers do really well. You have high expectations of yourself. You have really strong work ethics. You have a very specific routine that you use to prepare. You get really focused when it matters. You don't change based on the external perceived situation of the game. Lackey started 2 Game 7s, or pitched in 2 Game 7s. And I saw it with John Lester in 2020. He started against the Reds during the COVID season, and we walked back together after the game, and we were sitting up on the rooftop of the hotel outside, like 6 feet apart at the time. And I said, everybody else has been affected by this, but I just watched you pitch and you look exactly the same. And he looked at me and he said, well, what changed? I said, well, there's nobody in the crowd. And he goes, oh, I never thought about that. He's like, I have a baseball. I'm trying to throw it in this place to get these guys out. And nothing has changed about that. It's just a different environment. And I think about that start that he had in 2020. And then I think about the game that he pitched in the wild card game, I think in 2018, that we ended up losing, where it was like the same performance. One is like the whole season's on the line, and if we lose, we go home. And then the other one is like week 1 of the COVID season, which is super bizarre. And John was the same exact guy. And I looked at that and I said, how are people like that? Like, it's such an amazing thing to watch, and then be able to ask those people questions. And so you pull a lot of the stuff from those guys, filter it through the stuff I've learned academically. And then like we've been talking about, now it starts to link back to, well, how do we develop that earlier in people? How do we develop that earlier in people, give them an opportunity to really not just enjoy baseball when the goal is fun as kids, but also just enjoy it through the span of a career. And I think that's what really got me hooked. And so I love doing that work with people. I love hearing their stories. I love meeting with them and helping them with some strategies to like maximize their performance. But I think more importantly, really kind of figure out who they are from a values perspective. What do they actually value? How do they embody that when they go out and play? And it's funny it's like with the older ones, with the professionals, it's oftentimes connecting them back to the kid who first picked up the bat in the first place. Like, why did you want to do this in the first place? And that provides some peace and solace. And then for the younger ones, it's about telling them stories about these guys that I've had an opportunity to work with and see or just observe in some cases and say, I saw Yu Darvish do this over the course of a long period of time. And it was a really simple process that he had. And it took him 2 minutes every day before he played catch. And I think that's something that would be effective for you. And the kids hear that and they go, Yu Darvish, I'm going to do the same thing right now too. And then you see those skills start to build and people have success. And I just love being a part of that. I got an opportunity myself to achieve the thing that I wanted to achieve when I was that little kid. I got to step onto a major league field and play baseball. And this work for me feels like an opportunity for me to give back to that thing. And I think that's why I've been kind of most focused now on like this younger population. Parents out there should all go listen to Jeff Francoeur's podcast because he talks a lot about the youth sports side of things. But for me personally, it's less about being some public figure that wants to be doing a lot of posting and stuff to bring in business, and just really getting in and working with people one-on-one, because that's where I feel the happiest.
Right. John, speaking of young people, Konnor Griffin is 19 years old. He's going to be a star in the big leagues. Tell everyone the story that you told me about Konnor Griffin's approach, his philosophy about playing the game.
Yeah. So when we signed Konnor Griffin, he came down. I was still the farm director with the Pirates, and he comes down to Pirate City as our first meeting with me and Jonathan Johnston, who's our hitting coordinator. And so we're sitting there. There's the three of us in a room, and we would do this with all of our players that we drafted. We would kind of prepare some stuff for them about what we think about the next couple steps look like and their onboarding into professional baseball, what they can expect, et cetera. But we always ask them the question before we start, and I can tell the Paul Skenes one after this too. And we say, what do you have for us? And he looked at us and he said, I think I'm a really good athlete. He's like, but I have a ton to learn. I don't think I'm a great baseball player yet. I have a ton to learn. And there's a couple things that you guys need to know about me. He's like, the first thing is I really respond well to being challenged, and I will do everything it takes to possibly be better. I've had a hitting coach for a long time back home, but he even said that he doesn't know as much as you guys probably know. So here's his phone number. If you want to connect, please connect with him so that we can make sure that my training is consistent throughout the entire year. He'll facilitate whatever we're going to run. But push me. I want to be challenged. I want it to be really hard, and I want you guys to tell me the truth. And I will give everything I possibly can to be as good as I can possibly be. And last year, as a man of integrity, that kid absolutely lived up to every single one of those words. And it showed with this performance on the field. Yes, he's an incredible physical talent. But beyond being an incredible physical talent, he also happened to work, like through work habits, his way into every team that he played on last year as the team leader at 18 years old in Double-A. The kids, all the other guys looked up to him because they saw the way he showed up every single day, walked in with humility, and he led with humility when he came in. I mean, literally the first thing he said is, I don't think that I'm that good of a player yet. I know I'm a great athlete, but I have a ton of stuff that I can do. So then we asked him, we're like, hey, what have you been doing, from the draft until then? And he goes, well, I heard that there was a lot of really good velocity in professional baseball. He's like, so I've just been going to the cage, having them turn whatever machine they have all the way up, and I've been hitting off it, so I'm ready for the velocity. And for those that don't know, one of the things that sucks about hitting practice is a machine that's not necessarily throwing a fastball where you want it every single time and coming at extreme velocity. You have no pre-pitch kinematics, meaning like it's really hard to time, and you've got to figure that stuff out there. So basically what he was telling us is, he's like, hey, the thing that everybody like absolutely hates to do the most in all of professional baseball, which is hit off of a high velocity, shaky pitching machine. That's what I thought would be the most important thing for me to practice before I got here. And I mean, it showed up immediately with him. In the end of that 2024 season, he volunteered to go down to the Dominican Republic, and we had an opportunity, like an exchange program, where our players would go join the Dominican Instruction League with the new CBA. We need to have consent and a conversation, like a thing to be signed. But he was immediately, let's do it. Let's go down there.
Right.
Let's go play with those guys. They're my teammates.
tell the similar story about Paul Skenes when you met him and what you've seen from him as far as understanding where he is.
Well, with Paul too, Paul is like one of the few people that's like 21 where I talk to him and I'm like, why do I feel like he's older than me as we're having this conversation? You know, like there's this sense of, there's this like presence to that person and an aura that is really special. But so Paul came down and we had this, Josh Hopper was our pitch coordinator. We had this whole list of things that we wanted to work with Paul on. You know, as we watched him at LSU, we watched all this video of him. We're looking at some of the things and we're saying, okay, well, you know, this guy basically threw fastball slider at LSU. And so as he transitions to professional baseball, he's going to have to do a couple things. One, he's going to have to touch a different like rotation. He's used to pitching every Friday. He's going to pitch more frequently than that. So one of our goals was to constrain his innings, but get him on a 5-day so he can feel like what that routine feels like as he's moving into the next season. The second one was we looked at it and we said, okay, we got to have something that kind of goes this way. We got the slider that goes that way. We have the fastball that goes like this. We need something to go this way. He threw a couple changeups in college, but I think that we were pretty sure that the kids hit those like they were fastballs and they thought they were fastballs. So we needed something going that way. And then we noticed too that he would really manipulate his grip on his breaking ball based on the effect that he was trying to achieve. So we said, okay, like we should probably teach him or talk to him about learning a pitch where we just make a grip adjustment so he can throw the same thing. And we don't know, it could turn into a gyro slider or a curveball or something. We'll figure out where that goes. So same thing with Paul. He comes in, we sit down. I'm like, hey, Paul, so, you know, nice to meet you. You have anything that you want to say about like what you think this year this first year of pro ball should be for you? And he goes, yeah, he's like, I should have a list. He's like, the first thing is I'm going to need to touch a 5-day. I haven't done that before. I need to get used to that kind of routine. I don't think I should pitch a ton of innings because I have 123 coming out of LSU. And like, I just want to be smart about that, but I trust you guys to make sure that you manage that. He's like, the second thing is I need something that goes this way. You know, he's like, I threw changeups in college, but oftentimes those things got hit because I think the kids thought they were fastballs. So I just didn't throw them very often and I could get by on that. And he goes, the third thing is I throw my breaking ball the same way all the time. And I just kind of manipulate the grip. So I've been thinking about like, can we mess around with some grips to do this stuff? And I just went, yeah, there you go, buddy. Yeah. Yes.
Just did my job.
Yes. Yes. We'll do that. That's perfect. That's perfect. And so then he goes away that year and goes over to Georgia with Wes Johnson. And so we were so thankful working with Pittsburgh for Paul because, you know, Paul is very much like not a vocal, follow me or else guy. He's just like he shows up and does his stuff and works. And all the younger pitchers see it and they go like, I want to be like that guy. I remember when we drafted Paul Skenes, Bubba Chandler was in Greensboro in high A when we drafted him. I had made a visit and I was talking to Bubba and I'm like, how you doing? He goes, oh, I'm so excited. I go, about what? And he goes, we just drafted Paul Skenes. He's like, I figure you guys are eventually going to put him in Altoona. And if I keep pitching well, I'll be there. And that means I'll be on the same team as Paul Skenes. And here they are now. Right. Here they are now as major league teammates.
That is so good, John. We've been at this for an hour. We could go 4 more hours. I wrote like 20 things down I want to talk to you about. I got to like 2 of them. My last question, and I hope I've got this right. You pitched in a major league game and you got a victory. Do I remember that properly?
Yeah.
Would you please explain how a catcher could pitch in a major league game and actually get the win?
Oh yeah, of course. So, so this is July 29th, 2014. I know this because the next day, July 30th was Justin Ruggiano's son Brooks had a birthday party at like 8 a.m. that we were all going to go to at an indoor play place in Chicago. And so we were playing the Rockies in what was essentially the battle for not being the worst team in the National League. Edwin Jackson started the game for us, which I think is of note, given that I think he's pitched for him and Rich Hill are kind of neck and neck. It's like who can pitch for the most teams ever.
Yes.
Yeah. And Edwin is one of my favorite teammates. I think he's probably one of everybody's favorite teammates. And in fact, he probably crosses over with more people that ever played baseball anyway. Right. And so everybody loves that guy universally. But Edwin started the game and kind of had a rough go. He was out early. Our bullpen was cash from the day before. And it was one of those days at Wrigley where nobody was getting hits. And this game dragged on and on and on and on. And it got to the point where Pedro, I think it was Hector Rondon was the closer. And it was either Pedro Strop or Hector Rondon were completely unavailable. They had gone like 3 or 4 days in a row. There's no way Rick Renneria and Brandon Hyde were going to let them pitch. And I was thinking about it as the game was going on, and I'm looking up and down the dugout, and I go, no, this may happen, given that I am probably the most expendable player on this roster. Which I think is usually the qualification. It's like the list of like who can pitch that's a position player. Just flip it to the guy that like if he went down, we could probably replace him. So we get to the 14th inning, and Brandon Hyde comes over and he's like, "Baker, what do you think about pitching?" I go, "Yeah, absolutely. I've got a Tommy John fixed elbow. I'm good to go." So I went down to the bullpen to warm up, and Lester Strode, who had been with the Cubs for 25 years, maybe, wonderful coach and man. He's watching me warm up, and he's like, "What's your plan here?" And I go, "Oh, my plan's pretty simple." I'm like, "Have you ever watched batting practice?" And he goes, "Yeah, I throw batting practice all the time." And I go, "What do guys complain about the most?" And he's like, "Oh, good point. Bad BP." And I go, "Yeah, I'm going to go try to throw really bad batting practice on Wrigley Field. That's what we're going to do." So the first guy I think popped up foul. And then I think Christian Adames was making his major league debut. And the second hitter was Drew Stubbs. And Drew Stubbs popped up behind home plate. And poor Wellington Castillo was so tired as he was catching the 16th. He just like didn't make it all the way back to get the ball. So it fell. It fell in foul territory. Then I got really cute because I had another moment out on the mound where I'm like, if I throw a knuckleball in this game, then I can say after this that I'm a major league knuckleball. And there hasn't been that many of those. So then I tried to throw some knuckleballs and threw some balls. I ended up walking Drew Stubbs, which I'm embarrassed by. But then Christian Adames comes up, and he had a nice, just an optimal one-hop grounder to the second baseman with a runner on first base. We turned a double play and got off the field. I led off the next inning. In another kind of stroke of crazy baseball stuff, I hit a foul ball early in that at bat. They brought in Tyler Matzik, who was the next day's starter to pitch, and he threw a slider. I hit it off the end of the bat. I didn't realize it at the time, but I broke my bat. So I was hitting with a broken bat leading off the next inning. And so I walked to get onto first base, which kind of, there's two things about that. One, like they say on the scoreboard in Cincinnati, leadoff walks will haunt. Two, you never walk the pitcher when pitchers get hit. You never walk the pitcher. You always make the pitcher hit the ball, but they didn't get that one right. Yeah, so I found my way to third base. Starlin Castro hit a sac fly. I scored the winning run. We celebrated this is in the old home locker room at Wrigley Field before Theo and the crew did an incredible renovation job in there. So it was like, I always loved going there as a visitor too, because I was like, was Babe Ruth in this shower? Anyway, right. We celebrated like we won the World Series. I mean, I got carried through the locker room into the shower. I got the beer shower, the shampoo shower, all of that stuff. And I feel like it was, at least for us as a group too, it was such a ridiculous event that when you look at the record that our team had that season, it also was like this turning point of that franchise and that organization going from the lovable losers to then like, Javi Baez shows up and Kyle Schwarber gets drafted. And that was the year the Arrieta became Arrieta, and Rizzo hit 30 homers for the first time. They traded for Addison Russell. Like all this stuff kind of started changing right around that period of time. And I like to selfishly look back and say, like, maybe I had a little small part of it because I got thrown into some ridiculous situation. And people ask me, how did you feel when you were pitching? And I always say, I felt like every single person that's in the stands that would have gotten pulled into doing something that they'd never done before or hadn't done in a long time. That's how I felt. I felt like both player and fan at the exact same time. And it was a wild experience. Wow. Like I said, the next day we woke up, went to Brooks's birthday party, and then we had a game that night, which I caught, which also went into extra innings. So a lot of free baseball on the north side those couple of days. But yeah, a crazy thing. And I'm also, I did one more shout out here. I've got to shout out like Bleacher Jeff, and Danny Rocket and Tony Spangenberg and all the guys that show up and buy tickets and go into the left field bleachers every single day at Wrigley Field. Whenever I go back, I always go up and sit with them for a while. They go to every game. They are like the
Bake, you know
to
their
me, they are
names.
the ideal baseball
You
fan.
know their names.
Oh yeah,
and
oh,
you
yeah.
hang out with them when you go back there.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I love those people. I love those people. Danny Rocket is actually writing a baseball opera. You know, my brother's a musician, so they're in the Chicago scene. But I really got to know them because you know, after that, like we got to talking, and they helped me put on charity events in Chicago to celebrate that day. You know, like Danny Rocket wrote a song about it. And we did the first one at the Nisei Lounge. We donated all the money. The Nisei Lounge is the oldest bar in Wrigley Field. And they opened up the taps and said, hey, anybody that buys a beer, we'll donate it to whatever charity that you want. And we did it to Joe Madden's project. We supported the Chicago battered women's hotline a couple years later. Had to move on to a bigger place. So we ran it for 5 years in a row. We raised money. I would come back every year. And it was me and the bleacher bums trying to raise money for a good cause. And yeah, I miss those guys, but I don't really miss them because I still talk to them and see them.
All right, John.
Wow.
I've known you for 20 years at least, and I've never heard any part of that story. I'm ashamed I didn't ask you before today. Jeff, do you have anything else for him? Because we have to let him go. He's got a flag football game today with nieces.
I got to go cheer on flag football. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my only thing I would add is my wife's expecting a baby in June, and Dad, maybe if I am at the hospital at some point, we'll just have John Baker co-host with you for the day, because it would be a fantastic show. I would listen to that all day, every day.
John, that was tremendous. I told you, Jeff, his vocabulary just crushes mine. He's a better writer than I am. It pisses me off that he was a major league player and he's this well-spoken. Never mind. John, enjoy flag football. I will see you somewhere along the way, hopefully soon, okay?
All right, I appreciate you guys. Thank you.